You know, when you hear the name Fort Knox, what comes to mind? Probably impenetrable vaults, right? Stacks and stacks of gold bars, the very symbol of American economic power. It's become a legend, but legends are built on belief. And today, we're going to put that belief to the ultimate test. Seriously, just think about it. You wake up one morning, you turn on the news, and that's the headline. It's all gone. Every single one of the 147 million troy ounces. Every bar, poof, vanished without a trace. So, what happens next? Well, for most people, the first thought is probably complete and total economic Armageddon. The US dollar, the very foundation of the global economy, would just have to crumble, right? You'd expect hyperinflation, chaos, a total collapse. It seems like the most obvious conclusion. But what if that's not the whole story? What if I told you that the actual link between the gold in that vault and the money in your wallet was cut a long, long time ago? The real story here is so much more complex, and honestly, it's way more chilling. Okay, so this is the absolute key to understanding the whole paradox. The US dollar is what's called a fiat currency. Now, that's just a fancy way of saying its value doesn't come from a pile of shiny metal locked away somewhere. Its value comes entirely from trust, from our collective belief that the US government and its economy are stable and strong. Now, it wasn't always like this. For decades, you actually could trade your dollars for a set amount of gold. But the game changed completely in 1971. That's the year the US officially walked away from the gold standard. And from that day forward, the dollar's value has been based on one thing, and one thing only: faith. So if you take away one thing from this, let it be this: the gold vanishing doesn't mathematically devalue the dollar. No, the real disaster here, the true catastrophe, would be the psychological shockwave. Because if the US government can't protect its most legendary asset, what can it protect? And that shattering of trust would set off a devastating chain reaction, a domino effect. First, the impossible happens. And then, boom, all belief in American security just evaporates. All of a sudden, investors all over the world start thinking, wait a minute, are my US Treasury bonds actually safe? And that doubt, that alone, would force the US to offer way higher interest rates just to borrow money, which could totally cripple the government. And make no mistake, this panic wouldn't just be an American problem. Oh no, this would go global fast. You'd see central banks that hold trillions of US dollars scrambling to sell them off, trying to buy up anything else they can get their hands on: euros, Swiss francs, maybe even other commodities. The dollar's entire status as the world's go-to currency would be under serious threat. Okay, let's switch gears for a second and talk about the physical gold itself. I mean, we are talking about a mind-boggling amount of metal, around 147.3 million troy ounces just gone from the global supply. And that would have its own very unique, very direct impact. Now, you might look at a number like 2.3% and think, that's not that much. But believe me, in the super tight world of commodity markets, taking that much of a single asset off the board overnight, well, that's not a ripple, that's a tsunami. It would create a supply shock like we've never seen before. And this is where we get to the great irony in this whole scenario. Everyone's gut reaction is that the dollar collapses. But the most immediate, most predictable thing that would happen in the markets, the price of all the remaining gold in the world would absolutely skyrocket. It's just simple supply and demand. The commodity just became incredibly rare. Here's something else that's kind of fascinating. Check out how the US government actually values the gold it has. See, on the official books, it's priced at this ancient rate from decades ago, about $42 an ounce. That gives it a value of just over $6 billion. But its real market value today? We're talking hundreds of billions. That just goes to show you how its role has become more symbolic than anything else. So at the end of the day, it really all comes down to this. Losing the metal itself, that's a huge problem for the gold market. But losing trust, that's a problem for civilization. It would ignite such profound political chaos that it could literally force us to tear up the rulebook and redesign the entire global financial order from scratch. So you see, the Fort Knox paradox isn't really about the gold. It's about faith. The money in your pocket, the global economy, it all works because we tell ourselves a shared story about value and security. And that leaves us with one last, pretty unsettling question. If money is really just a shared belief, what's the true cost of losing that belief for good?